Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So again, good evening and namaste, everyone. So glad to see your sweet faces, or your names if your faces aren't there. We're studying the life of Holy Mother, of course, on Tuesday evenings. And a devotee asked whether a person who dies in Varanasi attains liberation. She says, "Is this true?" The mother replied, "Well, it is mentioned in the scriptures, and many people come here with that faith, so it must be true. Moreover, those who take refuge in God will definitely be liberated." And of course, there is the core statement of what she says. Varanasi is something special, as she'll go on to say. But the key is taking refuge in God. And so people come to Varanasi with that idea. And so Mother says, Varanasi is pervaded with pure consciousness. All living beings in this place are filled with divine consciousness. This is the glory of this holy place. On 11 December 1912, Swami Shantananda asked Holy Mother, "The Master had many visions in Varanasi. Did you have any?" "Mother, last night I lay awake on my bed when I suddenly saw the image of Narayana of the Seth's temple of Vrindavan standing by my side. The garland of flowers around the neck of the deity hung to the feet. The Master stood with folded hands in front of the image. I thought, how could the Master come here? I said, Rashbihari does not want to believe that one dying in Varanasi attains liberation." The Master said, "He must. This is all true. That Narayana image said to me that two things. One was, can one ever get the knowledge of reality unless one knows the truth about God? The other thing I do not recall," which is Mother's way of saying she didn't want to tell Swami Shantananda that. Sometimes the Master would say, "I feel something pressing on my tongue." Things would not be repeated, not said. Another day, Girijananda tried to argue with the Mother by quoting Shankara, who said, "Liberation is not possible without the knowledge of Brahman." Holy Mother told him, "My son, you have read much. You will go in a roundabout way. The master said that one would be liberated by dying in Varanasi. So let me repeat that. Doubts arise in our minds, no doubt. So it's just, who are we going to believe? Another day, Girijananda tried to argue with the mother by quoting Shankara, who said, quote, liberation is not possible without the knowledge of Brahman. Holy Mother told him, my son, you have read much. You will go in a roundabout way. The master said that one would be liberated by dying in Varanasi. Later, the Swami found that the mother's statement was supported by the Jabala Upanishad. I don't know that Upanishad at all. Girijananda recalled another such story. In 1912, the mother came to Varanasi. This is him telling the story, so we know some of this already. In 1912, the mother came to Varanasi and stayed nearly 3 months. I was then studying Panini's Sanskrit grammar, along with the Upanishads with Shankara's commentary. I was so absorbed in my study of grammar that during meditation, all those rules of grammar would flash through my mind. The grammar possessed me, and I could not concentrate on God. I decided to place my problem before the mother. One day I found her alone and asked, Mother, nowadays my mind is very restless. I can't practice japa and meditation. She asked, what do you study? I replied, I study Sanskrit grammar and the Upanishads in the Hindu college, and at noon I study grammar and literature from a Pandit. As soon as I said this, Radhu blurted out, so I see, being a monk, why does he go to college every day with books? Then the mother said emphatically, don't think that a little girl is saying this to you. Radhu blurted out, so I see, being a monk, why does he go to college every day with books? Then the mother said emphatically, don't think that a little girl is saying this to you. Know for certain that the Divine Mother is telling you this through Radhu's mouth. I said, then should I give up my studies? The mother replied, you have only one mind. Now, in what direction do you want to focus? Study or God? Give up your study. So their mother was saying, what deserves your attention? Study or God? This will be the very first subject of Sunday's talk. Where do we focus our attention? So she says, now what direction do you want to focus? Study or God? Give up your study. I obediently accepted my guru's order, but it hurt me immensely. So I obediently accepted my guru's order, mother being his guru, but it hurt me immensely. However, I stopped going to college and discontinued the study of grammar and literature forever. Now, I think that's the end of the storytelling by Girijananda, and we're back to Swami Chetanananda. It is amazing how Holy Mother would sometimes answer highly philosophical questions in 1 or 2 sentences. One day in Varanasi, Arupananda said to the mother, "Mother, I don't want nirvana. If I have nirvana, then I shall not have you." The mother replied, "My foolish boy, the true nature of God is nirvana." In other words, her true nature was nirvana. "Mother, I don't want nirvana. If I have nirvana, then I shall not have you." The mother replied, "My foolish boy, the true nature of God is nirvana." In October 1912, after Durga Puja, Swami Adbhutananda left Calcutta and moved to Varanasi. When he arrived, he stayed at Advaita Ashrama for a few days, and Swami Nirbharananda took care of him with great joy. At that time, Swamis Brahmananda, Shivananda, and Turiyananda were there. Adbhutananda found there were not sufficient rooms for himself and his attendants. Moreover, he was a mystic and ascetic, so it was hard for him to adjust to the ashrama routine, as his eating, sleeping, and meditation times were extremely unpredictable. He accordingly moved to Mr. Kundu's house in, oh my goodness, Godhulia, which was nearby. Did I say that right? Mr. Kundu's house, and somebody who's got the book. Is it Godhulia?
Godhulia.
Which was nearby. Thank you. Adbhutananda, you may recall, was one of the more peculiar monks. He was one of the master's miracles. He didn't follow any rules, really. Didn't know how to read, didn't know how to write. He was a strange one, but very, very, very intensely devotional. Vibhuti Mitra, an attendant of Adbhutananda, recorded the Swami's last meeting with Holy Mother at Varanasi. Sometimes, his name before he became Adbhutananda was Latu, so he was known as Latu Maharaj. So this was recorded of Swami Adbhutananda's last meeting with Holy Mother at Varanasi. Sometimes we were surprised when Latu Maharaj would say, "I don't venerate your ashrama routine. I don't venerate your Holy Mother." We were truly astounded because he had served the Mother for such a long period. How could he say that he does not adore Mother? Later we realized that he intentionally kept his devotion for the Mother a secret. One day he told us that he would go to worship the Lord Vishwanath. One day he told us that he would go to worship the Lord Vishwanath. We then collected flowers, bell leaves, fruits, and so on. Accompanying us, he left the house. When we reached the main street, he suddenly said to me, "Well, let us first go to the Mother." We walked to Kiran Datta's house, Lakshmi Nivas, the Mother's residence. Latu Maharaj went straight upstairs. He became overwhelmed with emotion in front of the Mother's room. His body began to tremble, and he fell down at the Mother's feet. He wept and wept, saying, "Ma, Ma." With tearful eyes, he then offered flowers at the Mother's feet. During that time, Holy Mother passed her hand over his head continuously. She showed her affection for him. She showed her affection to him by touching his chin with 3 fingers and then serving him prasad. This touching the chin with 3 fingers is at least the Bengali mother's way of kissing her child. She'll kiss her fingers and then touch them to the chin. She showed her affection to him by touching his chin with 3 fingers and then serving him prasad. It was a wonderful sight to see. After saying goodbye to the mother, he visited the Vishwanath temple. Holy Mother visited Advaita Ashrama in Varanasi many times. Whenever she arrived, she always went to the shrine to bow down to the master and then sat for a while. Swami Apuryananda left this account, which he heard from Shivananda, Shantananda, and others. So this is not his direct recollection, but that of Shivananda, Shantananda, and others. 2 or 3 days before leaving Varanasi for Calcutta, Holy Mother came to Advaita Ashrama at 10 o'clock in the morning. Swami Shantananda accompanied her. She went alone, straight inside to the shrine, and closed the door. Later it was known that she carried a small picture of her own under her cloth, along with some flowers and bell leaves. She bowed down to the master, placed her picture in the empty niche of the eastern wall of the shrine, and worshipped it with those flowers and bell leaves. After a while, she came out and called Chandra, Swami Nirbharananda, the abbot of Advaita Ashram, and said, "My son Chandra, please offer a couple of flowers to this picture every day." The Swami bowed down to the mother and accepted her command joyfully. Meanwhile, the monks of both ashramas got the news that the mother had come to Advaita Ashrama, and they all came and bowed down to her. She blessed them and then returned to her residence. When the mother left, Nirbharananda went to the niche in the shrine and found that the mother had worshipped her own picture. The master also did this, worship his own picture. He immediately reported this to Shivananda, who also went to the shrine and saw the mother's picture in the niche. He bowed down to the master and then the mother. He then went to the Sevashrama and described the incident to Brahmananda. The Swami became grave and said sadly, "Tarakta, this is not a good sign. It seems the mother is planning to leave the world." Now, Brahmananda's premonition was a little bit ahead of schedule because she didn't leave the world for about another 8 years. Shivananda then told Turiyananda, who remarked with a heavy heart, "The wish of the Mahamaya will be fulfilled." And this was very typical of the way Turiyananda talked. I won't go into this, but Swami Turiyananda was one of the master's most interesting disciples in the simplicity of his faith. So Turiyananda remarked with a heavy heart, "The wish of the Mahamaya will be fulfilled." After staying in Varanasi for nearly 2.5 months, Holy Mother left for Calcutta on 15 January 1913 and arrived the next day. It was her last pilgrimage. So perhaps she was thinking of leaving the world. Brahmananda couldn't have been dead wrong, but for some reason she stayed on. After staying in Varanasi for nearly 2.5 months, Holy Mother left for Calcutta on 15 January 1913 and arrived the next day. It was her last pilgrimage. She left for Jairambati on 23 February 1913, and for the remaining years of her life she traveled only between Jairambati and Calcutta. There's some footnotes here. I'm not going to read them. So I think you've heard me remark, and of course I'm just stating the fact, that Holy Mother became the head of the order, of the Ramakrishna order. Brahmananda was nominally president, and Vivekananda was nominally, the one who gave direction about how the monks should behave and so on. But any question that arose, they took it to Holy Mother. And it was her word that was the final decision. For example, when they first celebrated Durga Puja at Belramat, traditionally a goat was sacrificed as part of Durga Puja. Swamiji took this question to Holy Mother: shall we sacrifice the goat and take the goat's meat as prasad? And the mother said no. Now, it was a very common practice in those days to sacrifice a goat at Durga Puja. But Mother said no. And so they never did. They didn't sacrifice one at that one, and they didn't sacrifice one at any of the other Durga Pujas. So now we're at chapter 23, at Belramat with the disciples. And from a hymn by Swami Abhedananda, she whose life energy is merged in Ramakrishna, who delights in hearing his name, whose personality has been colored with his spirit. To her I bow down again and again. Abhedananda was very devoted to Mother, very devoted. Before we go on, it's probably a good idea to see if there are any questions or comments about all that was discussed in this description of Mother's stay in Varanasi. Any comments or questions about any of that material before we go on?
Yes, Brother Shankara.
Yes, Sham.
What I want to ask you is goat sacrifice still there in Calcutta at the time of Kali Puja? Probably may not be in the Ramakrishna Ashram.
I can only speak for what I saw in 1999. I don't know of anything about after that. It was still practiced at the main Kaligat temple the main temple to Kali in Calcutta, a goat was sacrificed every day because Kali Puja was performed every day. Now, whether it continues as a practice, I think you're right. The Ramakrishna order does not do it and did not do it then. But I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps Shailesh or someone else knows the answer. Nope. So apparently no one knows the answer to your question, Sham. I know that the Brahmins of Bengal do eat goat meat. So it's coming from somewhere.
It's not in the order I think they do that, but in Kali temple, like you said, over there at Kali Ghat, and there was some controversy, not in Kali Ghat, but some other temple like Kamkhya Devi or some other temple in Nepal, where they sacrificed 5 animals, and there was a big issue about it. So that is what I remember, but I've not, yeah.
And I don't know whether they still do it at Dakshineshwar or not. They did in the Master's Day.
Dakshineshwar, I think they do it because I saw some photographs where they showed that this is where sacrifice is done. And it's done, and I won't be surprised if they do it at Dakshineshwar.
Well, they did it in the Master's Day, I know, but
yeah,
I don't know whether they still do it or not. Good question, Sham, but we don't have a definitive answer from anyone.
Thank you.
Perhaps you can find out by some investigation online. It's amazing what you can find out. Yes, Swayam.
Brother Shankara, that mother's instruction to that particular monk to give up education, was that specifically meant for him because his studies were interfering with his meditation? Because I believe that the youngsters who want to enter monkhood are encouraged now to finish basic education, and even once they are in the monastery they do study scriptures and things. So was it more individual instruction?
Well, that would be my impression here. What did he tell her? And what was his testimony to us in what he said? That he couldn't practice japam and meditation because all of this stuff that he was studying was flying around in his head. In other words, it was highly activating his left hemisphere. And the mother told him, what is the focus of your, what deserves your attention, she said. Study or God. And yes, you're right. The monks are encouraged to finish their degrees. There's a very practical reason for this. Usually it's done before they enter the monastery. There's a very practical reason. If they decide, after they've been there for some time, that life is not for them, then they can return to worldly life and be equipped with a good education. The study that they do at training center is very tailored to deepening their knowledge that leads to knowledge of the divine. It isn't just like a college education. If you want to know more about that, you can find it out from the order, what they teach. You can ask Swami Sarvapriyananda. He was one of the senior instructors there for many years. Or you can ask the order. I'm sure they'd tell you. but it's not like getting a college education in the normal sense, and they don't offer any degree or anything of the kind. So they're trying to equip those young men with the knowledge that will lead to a deeper appreciation and understanding of the divine presence as they discover it through their practice of japam and meditation. They'll know what it is that they're finding.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from anyone? These are good questions. All right, we'll go ahead with Mother at Bellarmont with the disciples. The Chandogya Upanishad tells us that the life of a knower of Brahman is established in truth, and so his, quote, desires come true, and his, quote, thoughts come true. A knower of Brahman is established in truth, and so his desires come true, and his thoughts come true. Whatever country he longs for, whatever objects he desires, by his mere thought, all these come to him. Having obtained them, he is happy. If this is true in the case of an ordinary knower of Brahman, then what to speak of Holy Mother, who was the Divine Mother herself? Now let's just stop before we go on to the Swami's answer to that question. It's said that a knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. And so, in the manifest world, the Saguna Brahman, they share the attributes of Brahman or Ishvara. They become omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent in that sense. The only thing that they are not able to do, the scriptures say, and the Master agrees with this. It's not in the Gospel, but it's in the Great Master. They are not able to create a universe, nor are they able to destroy the universe. They can participate in the sustenance and protection of the universe. And that's what they do through their teachings. So it's no surprise this same information is conveyed in chapter 4 of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, that the yogi established in samadhi becomes omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. And so this fulfilling of any desire is just a matter of course. That business about what happens next to the yogi is a matter for another discussion. But if you want to know more about it, read chapter 4 of Raja Yoga, Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. So the Swami asks this question rhetorically so he can answer. If this is true in the case of an ordinary knower of Brahman, which those are comical words by themselves, an ordinary knower of Brahman, then what to speak of Holy Mother, who was Divine Mother herself? She intensely prayed for a place where the Master's disciples could live instead of roaming around. As a result of her prayer, Bellarmont came into existence. Now, we all know that Swami Vivekananda is credited with the creation of Bellarmine. But if you probe into his letters, you'll find that he acknowledges it was by the mother's will that everything came to him that allowed him to create, he and Ramananda and the others, to create Bellarmine. As a result of mother's prayer, Bellarmine came into existence. It is unbearable for a mother to see her
Shankara,
children. Yes.
sorry to interrupt you, but I remember there is another reason why she is credited, and that's if you remember in 1898 or 1899, there was a plague in Calcutta.
Yes.
And the Ramakrishna order was doing a lot of social work. And Swamiji at one point decided that we are going to sell off this entire mutt because we are monks and we are going to use the funds for the social work.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went to Holy Mother and he said, Mother, I'm going to sell all this and we are monks, we are going to live on the trees. And Mother said, no, you can do it, but there are other my children, they cannot become homeless, and there will be more to come. So she took I don't think so it was a big point of a discussion, but she just said, no, we should keep the center. So
yes, and Swamiji accepted her decision without question. You're absolutely right. But Bellarmine had already been purchased and established. It wasn't long, it had just been, and then this terrible situation arose where Swamiji wanted to sell off the land and use the funds for that. And she said to him that you and a few others can live that life that you're describing.
Correct.
But my other children cannot. You're absolutely right. That's what happened. And so no, mother directly interdicted Swami Vivekananda's plan. She said no, and notice that without question he accepted her decision. And these are the next lines. It is unbearable for a mother to see her children homeless and hungry. Holy Mother was relieved when the disciples bought the land for Bellarmine, the future headquarters of the Ramakrishna order. I suspect, Shailesh, that the story that you just related will be talked about in due time here in these next few pages. So the subhead is Ramakrishna Mat and Mission. Oh yes, we have plenty of time. Some historical background is helpful in understanding the mother's role in the Ramakrishna Mat and Mission. The Ramakrishna order was founded by Ramakrishna in the Kashipur garden house when he gave ochre cloths to his disciples. If you remember, he said, these are the inner circle, and he gave someone had given him ochre cloths, and he distributed them to his close disciples. And so that's what the Swami means when he says the Ramakrishna order was founded by Ramakrishna in the Kashipur garden house. And he was near death at this point when he gave ochre cloths to his disciples. He then asked the disciples to beg for their food, following the ancient custom. They first went to Holy Mother and asked for alms, chanting this hymn to the goddess Annapurna. O Parvati, the goddess of food, whose store is overflowing. O beloved of Shankara, give me alms so that I may attain knowledge and wisdom. And there's a picture in the book of the 16 monastic disciples of Ramakrishna. So I won't read the caption. The merciful mother, taken by surprise, gave them a handful of rice. Ramakrishna passed away on 16 August 1886. Some of his young disciples had to return to their homes against their wishes, while others had no place to go. They were like orphans. One evening, early in September, while Surendranath Mitra was meditating in his shrine, Surendra was one of the very close householder disciples of the Master. It was their relationship was very interesting, worth reading about. One evening, early in September, so not very long after the Master's passing from the body, one evening, early in September, while Surendranath Mitra was meditating in his shrine, the Master appeared to him and said, "What are you doing here? My boys are roaming about without a place to live. Attend to that before anything else." The Master could be very direct sometimes. Like, what are you doing sitting here meditating on me when my children are roaming about? And, these older householder disciples, they referred to them affectionately, but somewhat, it's like what my grandfather used to call kidding on the square. They referred to them as the urchins. But the Master was very clear. What are you doing here in your shrine? My boys are roaming about without a place to live. Attend to that before anything else. Immediately, Surendra rushed to Swami Vivekananda's house and said to some of the disciples who were assembled there, "Brothers, where will you go? Let us rent a house. You will live there and make it our Master's shrine, and we householders shall come there for consolation. How can we pass all our days and nights with our wives and children in the world? I used to spend a sum of money for the Master at Kashipur. I shall gladly give it now for your expenses." Accordingly, a house was rented at Baranagore, near the Ganges, at 11 rupees per month. Surendra paid the rent and provided food and other necessities for the Master's monastic disciples. Afterward, the monastery was moved to Alambazar, then to Nilambar Mukherjee's house at Belur, and finally established at Belur Math. Mother lived at Nilambar Mukherjee's house for some time, and after Belur Math was established. And you can still visit that house. It belongs to the order. I don't know about the Alambazar or Baranagore places. I don't think those are in the order's possession. But in any case, you can certainly stay at the guest house at Belur Math when you visit there, and you can go and at the time in 1999 when we went, it was a place where you could just go and spend the day if you wished. We did that. So anyway, they started out at Baranagore. Afterward, the monastery was moved to Alambazar, then to Nilambar Mukherjee's house at Belur, and finally established at Belur Math. Holy Mother's reception. Subhead. In chapter 13, we briefly mentioned that the disciples invited Holy Mother to Belur Math on Saturday, 12 November 1898. They wanted Holy Mother to consecrate the headquarters of the order. The Mother left Calcutta by boat and landed at the Belur Math Ghat with her women companions and attendants. According to Swami Adbhutananda, all members of the monastery took the dust of her feet and that dust is still worshipped in the mat. The mother was overjoyed by seeing the monastery building. The mother first went to the shrine, and then the monks bowed down to her. An elaborate arrangement was made for worship in the new monastery. That arrangement was made by Swami Vivekananda. At that time, the construction of Belur Math was not complete, and the monks were living at Nilambar Babu's garden house. The mother went to the second floor of the Math house. When she saw Dakshineshwar on the other side of the Ganges, she remarked, "This is a wonderful place. From here one will be able to think of Dakshineshwar." And you can from the Math grounds, you can see Dakshineshwar on the opposite bank of the Ganges on a good day. There's often so much smog that it's not possible to see it, but particularly in the morning when the sun's coming up, you can see it. The monastery diary includes this entry. Holy Mother came to see the new Math with her Thakur. Our Thakur was taken with her Thakur. Thakur is her picture, her image of the Master. Our Thakur was taken to the new house, and Mother performed the worship there. Thereafter, she came to the Math at Nilambar Mukherjee's house, offered boga, cooked food for the Master, and took her meal. She was much pleased to see the new house. Ashutosh Mitra left this eyewitness account. Today is Kali Puja, 12 November 1898. Today is Kali Puja, 12 November 1898. The monks of Belur Math were overjoyed because Holy Mother was coming. Swami Brahmananda arranged to set the Mangal Ghat, a consecrated pitcher of water, and banana tree at the gate of the Math house. Brahmachari Nandalal was busy with puja preparations. Swami Saradananda was supervising the cleaning of the shrine, courtyard, and all around. Swamiji was in his room. Meanwhile, the mother's boat arrived, and the disciples bowed down to her. The mother entered the shrine room and began to worship the relics of the Master. Tears flowed from her eyes, and she was in Bhava Samadhi. When that news spread, the monks began to sing. Let us call victory to the mother, and she will take us on her lap. We have our mother, and we are her sons. I'm going to repeat that. This is how they felt about her. Mother began to worship the relics of the Master. Tears flowed from her eyes. She was in Bhava Samadhi. When that news spread, the monks began to sing, let us call victory to the mother, and she will take us on her lap. We have our mother, and we are her sons. They danced with drums and cymbals in the courtyard under the tree. Listening to the song, Swamiji came out of his room and joined the group. He also played a drum and danced. It was a wonderful sight to see. Okay, we've got a few minutes left before we start the next subhead, Festivals at Belur Math. Any comments or questions about the mother and her relationship with these young men. Already, of course, others had joined, besides the master's 16 monastic disciples. So there were, I don't know, 30 to 50, something like that, young men there. Anything?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Sham.
Swami Abhedananda was still considered a Ramakrishna order disciple.
Oh, yes. He hadn't yet gone to the West and become something other. Yes, he was still very much a part of the program.
But
Kali Maharaj.
yeah, but later on he separated from the order.
Yes, well, that's all true. It's a very complicated story, but the many in the order still revere him greatly. Swami Swahananda was very devoted to the memory and consideration of Swami Abhedananda, in part because of his indescribable devotion to the mother. So, the politics of the order are the politics of the order. There's nothing to be said about that by us. I mean, where would we stand to make any, but just observe what happened. We can have our inner feelings about it, of course we will, but I can never remember a Ramakrishna order Swami, and I'm encountered many over the years. I can never remember one of them saying a word of criticism or anything objectionable about Swami Abhedananda. And he left quite a body of work on his own.
Brother Shankara, you got muted. I could not hear you.
Well, I don't know what happened. All I said was I can never remember in all of these years ever hearing a Ramakrishna order monk or nun say anything in the way of criticism or objection to Swami Abhedananda. He was revered certainly by Swami Swahananda.
And he was a very favorite of Swami Vivekananda himself.
Yes.
Because he called him here.
Yes, he called him to the West, and here he stayed for 22 years. But something about what he became when he was here, like I say, I don't want to talk about it because the politics of the order are way above my paycheck, particularly all those years ago.
I will share a blunt opinion here. It's a sign of ignorance when we look at these things. When we start our sadhana, I used to look at all this and I used to think about it. And there is a much bigger chapter about some other monk. I won't name. Brother Shankara knows it. Probably others, most of you don't know about. But as we go deeper and deeper into our own spiritual practice, these things just evaporate. They are not at all important. I mean, now the more I know about the order, or I have come across several monks, and my friends are all in the monastic order, and I talk to them sometimes here and there, and these things come up. But by grace of Thakur, they never touch my mind. Some of them are disturbed. Some of them talk about it. But like Brother Shankara said, we have to. This is what it is. It is Maya. Whatever it is. But if you really do our spiritual practice correctly, it will not bother at all.
Yes, it doesn't have anything to do with the goal of
Exactly.
our spiritual practice. Thank you, Shailesh. Anything else from anyone? All right, that being the case, I'll read the first little bit of this other. If there's nothing else from anyone, okay. Festivals at Bellarmont. After Holy Mother consecrated the monastery, Swami Vivekananda performed the public dedication ceremony on 9 December 1898. He carried Ramakrishna's relics to Belur and installed them in the monastery. He carried them on his head, by the by. He carried Ramakrishna's relics to Bellarmont and installed them in the monastery. He said, quote, "The master once told me, I will go and live wherever it will be your pleasure to take me, carrying me on your shoulders, be it under a tree or in the humblest cottage." Now, we can think of that as a very specific thing said to Vivekananda, but we can also think of it as something that applies to us. It'll be his pleasure whenever we take him, wherever we place his picture. I mean, the mother was very clear about this. The master lives in that picture. So wherever it is your pleasure to take me, be it under a tree or in the humblest cottage, I'll be pleased to live there, the master said. So let's keep that firmly in mind. I mean, it's such a reassurance to us. The Ramakrishna Monastery was finally moved from Nilambar's house to Bellarmont on 2 January 1899. Holy Mother was relieved that the master's children now had a permanent home and was happy that her prayer had been answered. The local Orthodox Hindu people of Belur and neighboring Bali were not as pleased. They began to gossip that Swami Vivekananda had established Bellarmont according to a Western method, and they complained that the traditional Hindu customs and dietary restrictions were not being observed there. Swamiji did not pay any attention to the criticism, nor did he allow others to protest. He only remarked, "It is a natural law that when a new idea enters society, the old Orthodox group goes against it. All pioneers of world religions had to pass through this test. Without persecution, no great ideas can penetrate society. Work without any motive. One day you will reap the result." So we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it there. I'll repeat those words next week to start, because this is again instruction to us. Nothing new germinates in us. Nothing new starts in us without there being the old Orthodox group within us against it. So I'll make some remarks about that next week when we gather to study the Mother. Anything else from anyone before we close? Any remarks or any questions? Yes, dear.
This is Haima. I'm glad they they opposed to what he was doing, but they didn't do it like Saint John John on the cross.
No,
So,
they
they really
they
fought
didn't
him.
they didn't have that power for a start.
Good, yeah.
But they also this was
Swami,
we'll hear about other objections to the order
sure.
and the order's way of doing things. It's, as the Swami said, it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
And it applies to our inner
Mm-hmm.
being as well. When we introduce something new, our old orthodoxy, our homeostasis, mitigates against it, and has it comes up with so many arguments.
Yeah. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear. Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
that whole interaction between Swami Vivekananda and Holy Mother about that selling that Belur Math land is so endearing. Here is Swami Vivekananda, so much, full of love and just wanting to serve, and Holy Mother balancing that with some um, um, practical things, and just imagining the two of them is just heart overflows.
Yes, isn't it so? And the mother was, as you said, her practicality was almost a kind of meta practicality. She said to Vivekananda, yes, you could live that life. You could live that life under a tree. But these others of my children who have come, they could not. They wouldn't be able to take it. And she was very clear about it. She knew what the limits of these young men were at this time, in the Kali Yuga. And she wanted them to have the opportunity to become rishis, as many of them did, by their interaction with and study with. By study, I mean in the sense of Patanjali's niyamas, study with the direct disciples. Because the direct disciples were quite a crowd, quite a crowd. Anything else? Thank you, Swayam. That was, yes, the heart overflows. All right then. Oma Satoma Satgamaya. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Abir Moiti. O dearly beloved, lead us from thy apparent truth, thy magic show, to thy absolute truth, beyond all description. Lead us from the transient to the permanent, from the finite to the infinite, from the changing to the changeless. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, everlasting peace to us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. May you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be cheerful, may you have peace of mind, and may you go in the Mother's loving and protective embrace. Jai, Jai, Jai Ma.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Hari Om.
Good night.
Hari Om, Hari Om.